So I've been thinking a lot lately about the state of things in my life and in our church and in our community and of course in our culture, in our country, and in the whole world. And as I think about that, somewhere in all that praying and thinking and studying, I stumbled upon a phrase that really stuck out to me. And of course I think it was pretty timely in our world these days. I stumbled upon a phrase which is the title of today's sermon, "Make America Grateful Again." Yes, I know this sounds an awful lot like the political slogan of the Trump campaign, to make America great again, and I'd be disingenuous if I didn't tell you I was trying to kind of milk that a little bit for something today, because I know that it's ringing in people's minds one way or the other. You've seen that a lot over the past year or so. Maybe it's more than a year. It feels like more than a year, and I think we'll be hearing it for a long, long time. So I'm going to kind of make a little hay out of that today and go with a little different variation about making America grateful again. And I realized that that's something I felt like is missing in our world today, especially in our country. That due to the political culture, we love to, I like to use the word whine, although that sounds kind of harsh, but whine or complain or point out the faults of things in our life. And we seem to have forgotten all that we have to be grateful for in our world, and especially in our country, but even in our personal lives. Now, to be honest, when I Googled stuff and I clicked on Google Images for "Make America Grateful Again," I even got led down another path which surprised me, and I came up to a sign that had the symbol of the Grateful Dead on it. Because if you are a deadhead, as I'm not, you want to make America grateful again. You love their music and in some ways worship their culture, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in all ways. And I did a little research. I've always known about the Grateful Dead and liked a song or two, but didn't know a lot about them. And believe it or not, the imagery in their band logo has some religious implications as well, as you'll find in a lot of parts of our world. Now, I'm not old enough, but apparently what I found out was sometime in the 60s, America split in two parts. You either went with the British invasion with the Beatles, or you went with the Grateful Dead. And I think my dad more went with like Charlie Pride. And none of those. If I judge from the reel-to-reel thing music he used to have in his collection, a little more country than any of those other two genres of music. I like the Beatles, and after listening to them this week more and more, I've come to really like the Grateful Dead. I didn't realize how much influence they had from music like country and the blues, which I really love. And then I started to read the words of their songs, and I'm definitely not a deadhead by any means, but I really appreciate some of the lyrics of their songs and what those things might mean. Now, to be honest, I almost went to a distant cousin of mine, a second cousin, Billy Joe Westgard. Some of you may remember as Billy Joe Schaefer, who after high school spent 3 years following the Grateful Dead around the country until she said she decided to kind of settle down a little more. That's an interesting path to choose in life, and I'm pretty sure that Billy Joe ended up in a lot of interesting experiences, but following a band around, any band around for 3 years does seem a little bit romantic in some ways, although I've seen enough videos of Grateful Dead concerts that I think I'd kind of be over it after one or two. But we all have our different tastes and things we like in life. Now, I will tell you that Billy Joe was always a bit of a free spirit and rambled around, and I'm sure she did in those 3 years. And I will also tell you that that reminds me of the disciples of Jesus, to be honest. Roaming around and spreading love and whatever way they could, and lessons that might make other people feel uncomfortable. So maybe being a deadhead isn't quite so weird as I had once thought in my life. But I started to look at some of the lyrics in their songs, and I came upon 3 songs, one of which I was already very familiar with because I watched MTV a lot as a kid. other song, which I read the lyrics to, that I'd like to start out with this morning is a song called Althea. And when I read some of these lyrics, in fact the whole song, but I'm not going to share all of it with you, it started to make me feel about, or think about, the state of things, or at least my feelings with kind of the mindset and difficulties our country's going through with uniting again after election and all the rough things that have been said between friends and family and leaders of our country, and how we bring that back together. The song starts out, I told Althea I was feeling lost and lacking in some direction, and Althea told me upon scrutiny my back might need protection. For some reason when I read that, I started thinking and substituting the word liberty in for Althea, or just our country, as if I was speaking to Lady Liberty herself. And then it would read, I told Lady Liberty I was feeling lost and lacking in some direction, which I think we all kind of feel sometimes these days. And she told me upon scrutiny, after examining me and maybe even our whole country, that our back might need protection. Now, you can think about that what you want, but it kind of tells me that we need to look around a little more and maybe look what's behind us while we're moving ahead, and to remember, as the Tim McGraw song, Humble and Kind, says, that when you get where you always wanted to go, to not forget to turn around and make sure that other people can get there as well. There's more you could read into that. The song goes on to some pretty interesting things, but the last three lines really stuck out to me, where they said, and I'm assuming this is probably written by Jerry Garcia, I didn't research that far, we're guilty of the same old thing, talking a lot about less and less, and forgetting the love we bring. That really hit home. We're guilty of the same old thing. In other words, we've probably done this before in our lives, especially even as a country. Talking a lot about less and less. I've certainly felt that over the last 6 months, that we've wasted so much time talking about issues that really weren't amounting to a hill of beans, and in my mind, a lot of things that equated to almost middle school drama, and forgetting the love we bring, forgetting the principles that we were founded on, especially in our state, of brotherly love, that the Quakers first brought to Pennsylvania through William Penn. I feel like sometimes when we've entered conversation and we should have been thinking about what love we could bring to the conversation, we've oftentimes, myself included, came full guns blazing with all the points we could make about why we're right and the other person's wrong, rather than trying to see what we might learn from the other side, whatever side that is. So that's how one of their songs stuck out to me. Again, the name of that is Althea. But it's gratitude that I'm talking about today, and being grateful is what keeps coming back to me. And as I told the children, I think that for me, the difference between just being thankful and being grateful is some sort of act in showing that gratefulness. Now, I was looking up a better way to explain the difference between gratitude and thankfulness, and it got all kind of confusing to me online. I've never been much of an English guy. Grammar and mechanics are really tough on me. I was better at math and science, to be honest, which really doesn't do any good explaining why I'm in seminary right now. I'm reading and writing a lot of papers, but in the end, this blogger wrote about the difference, and he talked about nouns and verbs and different kinds of verbs, and I forgot there were even different kinds of verbs. I can't remember what a verb is some days. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to go to that. And he joked at the end and he said, as his comments for the readers, if this answer helps, please show your gratitude, which is a noun, and express your thanks, which is a noun, by upvoting it. I'm not sure what that means, but I'll be grateful, which he said was an adjective. I'm going to say it's right because it's on the internet. If you do and would like to thank, a verb, I would like to thank you in advance for doing so. So those words bounce back and forth between noun and adjective and verb and how you used it, and I still sat there feeling like I don't know how to explain the difference between gratitude and thanks. But for me, I started thinking about why this word really stuck out to me, and it was the evening we did our worship here on addiction and reaching out to stuff. And many of you might remember the guy in the baseball hat, Travis Snyder. You've probably seen him on Facebook a lot. Travis is the founder and what I would call the head of the Skook Recovers, which is a group of people uniting together in their recovery to try and stay on the straight path in life. And also, they do a lot of community service. And Travis spoke that night about being more grateful in his life for things and how he can do that. And then I remembered how the Skook Recovers, this group of people, mostly made up of recovering addicts, who, for the most part, have probably dealt with the court system at some point in their life, organized a cleanup like I've never seen before. This group of people went to the Schuylkill County Courthouse and the prison, places that many of them have been before, and they cleaned up around the outside of the building. Almost as a way of penance, but as a way, in Travis's words, of being grateful for even those times where they've had to deal with that system, because for many of them, that's where they hit their bottom and needed to come back up and realize that they needed to do that themselves. That, to me, is being grateful. That was them expressing thanks to people who might even look at them funny, or still might recognize them for negative reasons, or think poorly upon them, even though they're doing their absolute best to change their lives and stay that way. Now, I'll tell you, I visited the county prison this past week. It takes a lot of guts to walk up to that place. When you go up there, the first thing you see when you're walking up the sidewalk is a sign that reminds you that in 1880 whatever, they hung 6 Molly Maguires on that spot. And that sign is most certainly bragging about that fact. That they're, hey, when you're coming up here, you need to know we've hung people here. And it stuck out to me, and I remember checking my pockets, so I better not go with my cell phone in my pocket, because I didn't want to end up like Molly Maguire thing. It looks, if you haven't been there, I mean, I had never been there, luckily, before. It's like a fortress, and it's not like a new fortress. It's really ominous and scary, and there's this big wooden door that you don't get to knock on it. You ring a bell, and then someone peeks open the door. There's no waiting area or lobby or, hi, how you doing today? And this guy, and I hope he doesn't ever watch this on YouTube, that reminded me kind of of Uncle Fester opening the door. Wanted to know why I was there, and I was there to visit someone, and that was a pastor of a church, and I'm thinking, I'm a pastor. I'm going to get in to see this guy I want to see. He said, you have to come back Wednesday between 9 and 10, and that's when the male prisoners get to see clergy. I couldn't just walk in. I mean, usually being a pastor kind of opens up doors. So I went back Wednesday between 9 and 10, and again, not a pleasant place to be. The security guard didn't want to smile back and all of those things, which is how the prison should be. And it just reminded me of how brave those people were that went to clean up there after having spent whatever amount of time they had in there. Now, granted, they were there for their own choices and probably needed to spend some time in there. I'm not saying that that should be the case or that the prison should be run any differently. What I am saying is that's showing gratitude. When you go to those lengths to say thank you, where you go back to a place that's hard to do. When you say thank you to someone after maybe they were right and you were wrong for still being kind to you, or all sorts of things that could happen. So I think about that a lot, and like I said earlier, we spend so much time complaining and whining, myself included, and I hate to say this, I think it's just kind of ingrained in us around here sometimes, to point out what's wrong with everything and complain a lot. People do that a lot around here. I do that sometimes. I think it's just in our DNA. And it gets on my nerves sometimes too. Why I can't just see the good in things. Now, granted, there are things we should complain and whine about, and sometimes these issues are very important. People have a lot on their minds, and sometimes speaking up and saying this isn't right is exactly what we should do, but we can't forget to be thankful to God in all things, as Paul teaches us. We forget sometimes to do that, and this time of year, especially this week, is a good time to remember to do that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't point out an injustice or fight for something that you think is right, or fix something in your life if someone's done something wrong to you, but I am saying don't forget to be grateful. More than thankful, but to be grateful for the things that we do have. There's a lot wrong with this world, and I get that. I even thought, as I read the lyrics to another Grateful Dead song called New Speedway Boogie. I hadn't heard that, and the song doesn't have anything to do with time, which I have no idea. I guess that's why I'm not a deadhead, because to me the title and the song should match up. But it's called New Speedway Boogie, and the song doesn't mention speedways or boogies at all, which I'm glad. And we'll keep our boogies to ourselves. But the last paragraph of the song says, I saw things getting out of hand, and I guess they always will. Now, I don't know, but I've been told, if the horse don't pull, you got to carry the load. I don't know whose back is that strong, but maybe we'll find out before too long. One way or another, this darkness got to give. When I read that a couple times, it kind of stuck out to me that it's on us to pick up the load. The horse isn't going to carry it. In my mind, that is all of those out there. Whatever we think we rely on to save our lives other than Jesus, whether it's the government or our employer or coaches or whatever, the horse isn't going to carry the load. Whoever's been in charge in your life has not really impacted your life that much, in charge of our government, I should say. The biggest impact you can have is in your own personal life. And one of the biggest things I think